and listening online. I would like to first recognize the panel for this afternoon's discussion. The Minister, the Honorable Samuel Joseph, and the Director of Public Prosecution, Mr. Oris Sullivan. Today we're here to discuss the Penal Code Amendment Bill, which will be making provisions for offenses related to cybercrime. I am Lonnie Howe, the chair for today and ICT coordinator within the government of Montserrat. As mentioned, we're here to discuss the amendments to the Penal Code, and the way the discussion will be taking place today is that I'll first like to ask the panel to give a brief overview of the importance of this amendment and to their respective offices and to Montserrat on a whole. And I'd first like to ask the Minister to begin. But first, I'll just like to give a summary of how the structure of today's discussion will be. And after they would have made their presentation, I will summarize the bill, going through each offense, and then after which we can then go through each offense in turn. So, Honorable Minister, you can begin.
Good day, everyone, and thank you, Lonnie, for that welcome. As you pointed out today, we're discussing some amendments to the Penal Code that deals with cybercrime. As we all know, the world is becoming more virtual. More and more things are going online. More and more of our activities through e-commerce, through entertainment are taking place through the virtual world, through computers, through phones, through tablets. And some of the laws that we have now do not take into account, how do you put it, activities. Any human activity is going to have people that do things that they should not be doing for the smooth functioning of society, of things that we call offenses. So we have to modernize our legislation to take into consideration the fact that the world has changed and a lot of things that used to happen in what we call the real world are now moving virtually. So things like, stealing occurs in the real world, but stealing in the virtual world may be a different way, may take place in a different kind of way. So in order to make sure legislation is in tune to the direction in which the world is going and to the direction in which Montserrat is going, we are proposing some amendments to the cybercrime bill, and we are coming to the public to see what their views are so that we can make any adjustments before we finally bring it to the Legislative Assembly.
Good evening, listeners. Good evening, viewers. Good evening, Lonnie and Dr. Sammy. Thanks for inviting me to this program. As Dr. Sammy has quite rightly said, things have changed and has changed dramatically in recent times, especially during the COVID-19 crisis. We have seen that more things are being done virtually. But even before that, for years, there has been complaints about the way activities are done online. Sometimes people committing offenses with impunity. The penal code, as it relates to Montserrat, is really the tool that police officers and criminal prosecutors work by. Most of the infringes to our laws are enshrined in the penal code. So, for example, when there's an offense of theft, an offense of rape, an offense of burglary, indecent language, these are all catered for by the penal code. So too is our legislation as it relates to information technology, well, in a limited sense. The whole purpose of this bill is to improve the way the legislation is and to add to what the existing legislation is. Earlier this year, those of us on Montserrat would have heard complaints about two of our prominent members of society being charged with criminal libel. The general complaint was that in most of the jurisdictions, libel is no longer an offense. But in Montserrat, it still is. And in charging people, we have to take into account what is available, which fits into the particular circumstance for which we can charge. And in those circumstances, libel was the only thing that the infringement fitted into. With this new penal code amendment, it would assist prosecutors, it would assist investigators in charging or finding something suitable within the penal code setting for these offenses to be dealt with.
Okay, thank you, the Honorable Samuel Joseph and Mr. Sullivan. Now, before I begin, I would like to mention again that I will be summarizing each offense in turn. The actual bill can be found online for ease of reference. There is a link right at the top of the Ministry of Communication, Works, Energy, and Labor Facebook page. And there is also a link on the Government of Montserrat website, and that is www.gov.ms, that's gov.ms. And you will have to go on the ministries section of that page, and at the bottom right of that page, there is featured publication, and there you will see the draft bill. So you can actually follow along. As mentioned, it is the summary that I will be speaking of. And also to mention to the persons listening online, you can submit your questions or comments via the live feed, and we will be sure to answer those. And also members of the audience, feel free as well to submit your questions after I would have summarized each offense. And for the panelists, after I would have read each offense in turn, you can always interject to give, you know, a better definition of the actual offense or any examples you wish to cite. Okay, so now I will first begin with the first offense, and that is under section 289B of the Penal Code. And that says, illegal access to computer system. Intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification, access a computer system or any part of a computer system. So that is a person who intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification accesses a computer system or any part of a computer system. And for the purposes of this computer system, that is defined as a device or group of interconnected or related devices which follow a program or give instruction to the actual device. And broken down, that is your phone, tablet, PC, or anything of that nature. And this particular offense is often referred to as hacking. Right?
One way to look at these things in the virtual world is to try to match it back. What would the correspondence be in the real world?
Yes.
So if I have a house, the house belongs to me. And unless you have permission to be in my house, how did you get in there? Why did you open my lock and come into my house? That would be considered breaking and entering.
Yes.
But in the computer world, if somebody has a computer, it is their personal property. And unless you have permission or lawful justification, you should not go into people's things. That's basically what it boils down to.
Yes. The 289C, illegally remaining in a computer system. And that is someone who intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification remains logged into a computer system or part of a computer system or continues to use a computer system. And Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, just to carry on from where Dr. Sami left off. That is like, again, like your burglary. You're in a house and you have permission to be there, but that permission is withdrawn. Mm-hmm. And once that permission is withdrawn, then you're no longer authorized to be there. But that person chose to remain in the house. So some may think of it as trespassing, others may think of it as your real-world burglary.
Good. Thank you. The next offense, oh, I think I would have skipped. Yes. The next offense, and that is section 289D, illegal interception, and that is intentionally and without a lawful excuse or justification intercepts any subscriber/user information or traffic data or any communication to, from, or within a computer system or any electromagnetic emission from a computer system. And this is where, you know, the offender would be eavesdropping on communication between the sender and receiver of the information. during the process within a computer system, right? So that is generally seen to be eavesdropping. Minister, you have an interjection there?
Eavesdropping, on the other way, I said to try to get a relation. If you think about a letter, if I send a letter from me to you, Lonnie, somebody else should not take that letter, open it, and read it before it gets to you. The letter was addressed to you, and nobody has the right to intercept it and see what's in it before it gets to you. So eavesdropping is the right word, or as I said, intercepting, taking that letter, looking into it before it gets to you. So if I send a message to my computer system, my phone or something, somebody does not have the right to pick it up and see what it says, and it was not meant for you.
Right. And I know with sophisticated equipments these days, it's not that you could go into somebody's email address, but more so a hacker can also access this information as well. And I know with sophisticated equipment, like I said, this is very easy for the common man these days to do. Okay? So the next offense, 289E, illegal data interference, and that is someone who intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification damages computer data or causes computer data to deteriorate. Any comments on that, or is that straightforward? The next offense, illegal acquisition of data, and that is intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification obtains for himself or for another person computer data which is not meant for him or the other person and which is protected against unauthorized access. (289F).
That is your computer fraud. Coming into information that is not your information or wasn't meant for you, but obtaining it by some electronic means, either by trick or by fraud.
Okay, 289G, illegal system interference. And that is someone who intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification hinders or interferes with the functioning of a computer system. Or I might add, hinders another person who is lawfully using or operating a computer system. Section 289H, offenses affecting critical infrastructure, and that is hindering or interference with a computer system that is exclusively for the use of critical infrastructure. And for the purposes of this section, critical infrastructure would mean any computer system or device or network or anything of that sort that is vital to Montserrat. Right, so that particular section is vital to Montserrat. That may be destructive if that infrastructure is deteriorated. So in breaking that down further, in terms of the importance of it to Montserrat, that would be considered any security breaches or any sort of international relations of Montserrat once that particular infrastructure is actually broken, if that's a good word to use, then that would be an offense.
And in terms of, if it try to find more real-world example, the fiber project came and a fiber cable was laid down. If you go and interfere with that cable and break it purposely without lawful excuse and interfere with the operations of the data going through, that will be an offense. So it's to protect our ICT infrastructure from people willfully destroying it.
Most of us remember at the millennium, year 2000, when there was this fear that at the end of the millennium, nothing will work. So our water system, those things operated by computer. So if we can give a real life example of Montserrat, let's say Mull. Mull's electrical system is operated by computer. If somebody hacks into that computer and closes down the entire system where there's where nothing can work. That is what we consider to be the critical infrastructure, and there is where the offense has been committed. You will see, of course, that this section prescribed for a fine of $1 million and 15 years imprisonment. So that certainly is some consideration as to how serious this offense is considered to be.
Yep. Illegal device, and that's under section 289L. Producing, selling, procuring for use, import, export, distributes, or otherwise make available or has in his possession a device, including a computer program, that is designed or adapted for the purpose of committing an offense. And this would also include a computer password or some sort of code that will also be used to access that illegal device. Identity-related crimes. Intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification, transfers, possesses, or uses a means of identification other than his own with the intent of committing or aiding or abetting the commission of an unlawful act through the use of a computer system.
And this is a big one because identity theft is a big issue, because if you're online and you're interacting with other people, the other people on the other end have to have some trust that they're interacting with you. So if I go online and I use Lonnie's credit card and I pretend to be Lonnie and answering questions of if I'm Lonnie, because you get asked these questions, and you're pretending that you are that person, you've taken on that person's identity in order to commit activities or do things that you should not do, you would have committed an offense. So you have to protect the users online to ensure that when you see Lonnie Howe or Samuel Joseph, name comes up that you're sure it's that person. It's when it's pretending to be me that is going to become a crime.
And that would be offensible, yes. Section 289K, computer-related forgery. Intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification, inputs, alters, deletes, or suppresses computer data, resulting in inauthentic data with the intent that it be considered or acted upon for legal purposes, as if it were authentic, regardless of whether or not the computer data is directly readable or intelligible.
This will be the same as a real-world forgery. You take a document and you change information and you put a signature that's not yours. It's forgery. So the same thing can happen online. If a document come through, or data come through, or something come through, somebody can modify that and pretend that it's the authentic one when it's not. So it's similar to real-world forgery. It's the same thing in computer-related forgery.
Section 289L, computer-related fraud, and that is intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification, inputs, alters, deletes, or suppresses computer data. DPP, I'm not sure if it's possible to break that down in terms of the definition between, or the difference between fraud and forgery for the benefit of the listening audience.
Forgery is the minor alteration. Fraud includes quite a number of different things. For example, fraud could be inputting information which is untrue for the purpose of obtaining benefit. Forgery is different. Forgery is the alteration of written documents, but fraud is different. There can be alteration in fraud.
Okay. Section 289M, violation of privacy. Intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification, captures, stores, publish, or transmit through a computer system the image of a private area, that is genitals, pubic area, buttocks, or breasts, of another person without consent and in circumstances where privacy would have been reasonably expected. Again, I would like to remind you that computer system, the definition for that, for the purpose of this section, means a device or group of interconnected devices. i.e. your tablets, your phone, your PC, etc. And this has been something that would have happened, I'm sure, in the past. And of course, this is a new piece of amendment. Now, how would that be dealt with in the past? Any sort of anything in the penal code that would have addressed that, DPP?
No, there's nothing in the penal code at this point that addresses that. Thankfully, this is coming. And this is your case where, for example, your neighbor, you're in your house, you're within private surroundings, and you're doing something. You're naked. Let's keep it in simple terms. You're naked. Your neighbor, for example, captures your image and goes on to post it on social media. We know of the indiscriminate posting of people these days. So this is a case where they post, you're in a private surroundings, for example, your house, and they post it to a public domain.
Right. And the act of transmitting that particular piece of whether it's a photo or video, it's saying here that they publish or transmit through a computer system. So if, for instance, somebody sees that and then goes on to transmit that photo, that is also an offense?
It is.
Right.
And publish should not be really taken in the literal sense. Publish in this sense means really posting.
Posting,
Posting.
yes. Yes.
This is a big one because people need to understand what this is saying, that if you do not have permission to take certain pictures of people, you should not have them. Even if somebody sends them to you, even if you didn't take the picture and you send it to somebody else, you would have committed an offense. People's body is their private property. And if they have an expectation of privacy, that privacy must be maintained. So if you're in a relationship with somebody and you, for whatever reason, obtain pictures, and as I said, once you all broke up, and because you're vexed, you go and transmit these pictures to embarrass the person or anything, you are now going to be committing an offense because the person has an expectation of privacy that was broken.
Okay, another big one, child pornography, and that is intentionally producing, offer, distributes, procures, obtain, or possess child pornography through or on a computer system. Child pornography, the definition for that is quite lengthy. I'm not sure if I would need to go through that, no? So this, again, is a big one and carries quite a hefty fine as well.
The move internationally in recent times is to try and dissuade people who publishes child pornography. The important thing to note about this is what constitutes a child, and a child really means anybody under the age of 18. Let me repeat it, anybody under the age of 18. And this is when somebody displays the private parts of a child under the age of 18. Pornography is self-explanatory. It means nakedness or showing some naked parts of a child. And this is a very serious offense, not only in Montserrat, but internationally. The child pornography sells. That is something that is very costly in the international world. And that is what the international authorities are trying to dissuade, that somebody has possessed or in some way came into photographs of children, naked children, and passes them on or sells them or uses them in some indiscriminate way. And children has to be protected. We have a duty as adults to protect our children, and this is the reason for this particular offense in the amendment.
Okay, and to add to that, as I mentioned previously, the act of obtaining and possessing that picture and video of that child is an offense, according to this particular section of the bill.
And this is a big one that a couple of things to recognize that what we're doing here is that the definition that we're using for a child is 18. So if you possess, distribute, or have images of children in pornography, which is self-explanatory, below that age, you would have committed an offense, and there's serious penalties that we are recommending for it. It does not matter if you took it. If somebody sends it to you, through WhatsApp and it's on your phone, the fact that it's on your phone meant that you would have committed an offense. You cannot have, distribute, or produce pornographic images, videos of children. We are going to take a stand against that, and a very strong stance.
Okay, I'd just like to remind the audience and the audience here in Cultural Center and audience online, please remember you can submit your questions and concerns.
Let me just start. One thing in relation to child pornography. It is possessing it without justification.
Yes.
So if, for example, a doctor has it as a child being their client and it's for some educational purpose, that would not constitute an
Yes.
offense.
Yes.
So there are some justifications for these offenses, but you must have a lawful justification.
Yes. Okay, 29O, conditions applicable to a child's consent in relation to information society services. And that is a child of at least 16 years of age may give consent to information society services. If the child is below the age of 16, possessing the service shall be lawful only if it is authorized by the holder of parental responsibility for that child. And for the benefit of those listening, the information society means services normally provided for remuneration at a distance by means of electronic equipment for the possessing, including digitally, and storage of that data, and at the individual requests of a recipient of that service. Minister, anything for that?
Well, it's basically saying again that if you are below a certain age, your images are protected, and if somebody wants to use that image, they have to get your explicit permission. For example, if you're applying for your driver's license, you have to send your image. To obtain that driver's license, a parent or guardian or somebody has to authorize that it is okay for them to use your image. Your images of children will be protected.
Harassment using means of electronic communication. Someone who uses a computer system to cyberbully intentionally or recklessly another person. This includes the use of a computer system to disseminate false information or to expose the private affairs of another person and subjecting that person to public ridicule, contempt, hatred, or embarrassment will be committing an offense. For the purposes of this section, cyberbullying means the use of a computer system repeatedly or continuously to convey information which causes fear, intimidation, humiliation, distress, and to be a detriment to the other person's health, emotional well-being, self-esteem, or reputation. That's the definition of cyberbullying in this context.
Right, and the fact that you're low to the definition, I just need to explain that it doesn't have to be all of these. Any one of these can suffice. So if the purpose of cyberbullying is to create fear, for example, you have committed the offense. Notwithstanding, you have not caused the intimidation or humiliation or the rest of it. This, to me, is probably the most welcome of all the amendments to the local population. Because far too often we hear complaints of, oh, this information has been spread about me. This is false information. Somebody sent my picture on Facebook. Somebody says, have been circulating WhatsApp information. Now, this really remedies that particular situation so that we can now embark on the responsible use of social media rather than using it as a weapon against other people to cause distress and harm.
Okay, just a little interjection here. In terms of cyberbullying, how would it be interpreted? Because I'm thinking cyberbullying can be a subjective term. Like how would one prove that that person really is being bullied
Well, it seems to
or
me,
being caused distress?
You see-
How would that stand up in court?
it seems to me that this is expected to be an objective test, so that if to the ordinary member
Okay.
of society that is bullying, then it
Then
is
it
bullying.
is, okay. Just needed to clarify that.
But you will see that the provisions, that the amendment makes provisions for it to be continuous. So it has to be on more than one occasion.
Okay.
From that, well, if something is done on more than one occasion you can consider that to be an accident. On the second occasion, of course, it can be thought to be deliberate.
Okay.
And then you apply the objective test.
Right, got it. I hope that's clear, because that's very important to note.
And it also says intentionally or recklessly. So it's not something you do by accident or something you weren't sure
Yes,
about.
yeah.
It's an intention that you set out to do.
Good. Okay, I know some questions coming in online. I'm just holding the questions until we finish our slides. We just have 2 more to go through, and then we'll take the questions. So the next offense, that is 289Q, spam. Intentionally and without lawful excuse or justification, initiates the transmission of multiple electronic mail messages or email from or through a computer system, and thereby causing harm to a person or a computer system. It also includes the retransmission of multiple electronic messages with the aim to mislead or deceive the users. Minister, you need to break that one down.
I know if you have an email, all of us have an email address, and you realize that sometimes a lot of stuff comes in over and over, that it's just harassment. Every day the same message is coming from these companies, or telling you that you have won these prizes, that you have won this lotto, that you have these opportunities, and it keeps coming over and over. If you have a sophisticated email system, it sends it to your junk mail and you never actually see it. When you go into your junk mail, you realize a lot of these things exist. So we make it an offense for you to produce these things and to be sending these constant messages to people's computer with the intention of either committing fraud or to harm their computer or to pretend. So you modify something and pretend that you're Amazon and send something saying that, oh, you owe this money, or log into your account. If you falsify the email headers, if you continuously send mails to multiple people for these things, we are going to consider it an offense, and there will be penalties for that.
Okay. Spoofing, it's a new term, establishes a website or sends an electronic mail message with a counterfeit source with the intention that a visitor to a computer system or recipient of an electronic email will believe it to be an authentic source. Right, so I know a lot of spoofing is happening lately, and that is where persons will be receiving emails from persons who seemingly be a genuine or authentic person, and you would call that person and say, hey, did you send me that email? Only to find out that that person really did not send you that email. Generally, we tend to think that these persons are maybe persons in Africa or Nigeria, these places, but in fact, it can very well be somebody here who can do that. So that is why we are taking a stance on this particular offense.
And for spoofing, again, is, for example, you have Amazon.com. Somebody can create a fake website, and instead of putting the A, the second A in Amazon, they put an O. And they make it to look like Amazon website and ask you to input your password and your email. And you're thinking it's a legit site, and you're putting your password and email, and the person gets access to your real account. We are saying if you do such activities, we're going to consider it an offense.
Yep. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the offenses that we'll be discussing today. And inputs. I'll now open the floor for any comments, suggestions. Please be reminded, for the persons listening online, you can submit your questions via the feed that you're looking at. If you are listening to the playback, you can actually email us at mcw@gov.ms on or before the 6th of November, and we'll be happy to address them. So I'd now like to open the floor to the audience. If you have any questions or comments. Yes, go ahead. Good evening.
And good afternoon and good morning, because we are worldwide. I've been listening and I've read a portion of the document that was sent. And Dr. Sami, Lonnie, you guys know who I am. And a certain part of my profession basically centers around what we're here trying to discuss. There are 4 things I'd like to point out, basically. We always say computer systems, Lonnie. The discussion that we had in the last meeting for cybersecurity and cybersecurity specialists, that the Internet of Things need now to be added to computer systems. Basically, that's a broad, very broad term, the Internet of Things. So basically, where we have computer systems, they are saying now that we need to include IoT, Internet of Things. Because what is happening here now is that the emphasis, when you say computer systems, you are focusing so much on hardware. Now, Microsoft is going to a next level next year, in the next couple of months, where you don't really need a hardware now to access Windows. Yeah? So how do you, the laws that you want to put now will get ahead of that type of technology? Because let's say that you forget that and something happens right after Microsoft does what it's going to do, basically. Then how do you get around that? So just a suggestion, something to look at. Where you have computer systems, the Internet of Things, to be added or thought about. And point number 2, lawful. That's another discussion that was broad. We need to remove that word lawful, because how do you describe lawful to someone? You said lawful, or who does not access that device lawfully. What is the law that bridges that gap to let me know, or the users know, what is lawful and what is not, and what is unlawful? So what?
Question. DPP, would you like to take that?
Yes.
Definition of lawful?
Yes, lawful.
In terms of lawful?
Yeah, lawful.
Lawful really in this sense means having authority. So it doesn't mean that there's some provision in our laws of Montserrat that governs it. My computer is my computer. If you enter my computer without my consent, that is unlawful. So lawful in this sense means with the consent of the owner.
Okay, what they are saying now, basically, that it is your computer, but you're accessing someone's internet. You get what I'm coming from? It is your computer, yes, but you're accessing the ISP's subscription portal. You're accessing some subscription, you're accessing some, if you get where I'm coming from. So what they are trying to say now, in broad, basically, that we need to move that word, because then we are confined. Yeah? You have to explain to me, or in the court of law, whatsoever, what is really lawful and what is unlawful. So that's, they're saying we should not be forced to use that word. What they're saying, zero tolerance when it comes to this type of legislation, zero tolerance. Don't leave it out there hanging. That's what they're trying to say. That's a suggestion. Now, in the point that you made with photos and pornography and etc., let me ask a question. Suppose a hacker put some photos there of 16-year-old and you do not know, and you find that phone or that device. How do you get around that?
Any offense whatsoever, be it cyber or general offenses, the importance is having evidence, and evidence, of course, may include the phone. We found this on the phone. But if you as the owner can show that it is there without your knowledge, then that's a defense.
Okay.
But it's your phone, the onus is on you to prove that it was not known to you that that image was on your phone.
Yeah, and basically, I think that's the few points until I hear some more.
Let me just add that I think at the end of our earlier presentation, we emphasized the fact that we're trying to bring legislation that is in keeping with the international committee. Although it's legislation for Montreal, it is in keeping with international legislation and international best practices. So you may find in these provisions that there are offenses that can be committed by people overseas and not necessarily those on Montreal.
Correct.
It is in keeping with the international practice.
Okay. Okay, so we have some questions coming in online. Okay, you can come to the podium while I read this question. One person asks, does spoofing only take place via email, or can this happen via social media too? Minister?
When I went back to look at the current draft only refers to a website of an email, but that's an interesting point.
Yes.
Because it is possible to create a fake social media account as somebody and pretend to be them.
To be that, so that's
So
an
I
excellent
do agree
input.
that's an excellent suggestion, and it's something that we should look at and see how we can incorporate that.
Good evening. Yeah, I'd like to congratulate the ministry for taking this step and moving forward and making sure that we are up with the modern world. I have just a few comments. It wouldn't be technical like the previous speaker because I'm a layman. But firstly, looking at your the definitions in the beginning, I'm wondering if the language matters, whether it's English or American. Because the first thing I note, which appears a lot, and seen where a British territory is program. And it appears quite a bit. So I don't know if it makes any difference. So I'll leave it up to you to decide whether it could stay so or it has to be anglicized. There are a couple other things. Not being a legal person, I don't understand what the brackets mean. And I noticed the only time that a fine was mentioned was with the DPP, when the DPP mentioned one. So I think that opens the door for me to go there. I was wondering, does this bracket mean up to that amount, or is it that fixed amount?
Right. In any legislation, once you see an amount, it means the maximum sentence.
That's the maximum.
Right. Most offenses, except where they're habitual criminals, does not attract the maximum for your first offense. So you can be fined up to $1 million. You can be fined up to $750,000. You can be fined up to $100,000. But there's this general legal principle that you cannot take away the discretion from the court. So the court always retains a discretion as to what fines to impose, what term of imprisonment to impose, and so on. So it's only an indication of a maximum sentence.
Okay, there is the question of, quite often it's an individual who does this. Suppose the individual is a young techie getting a job with a company and he's instructed by the company to do this. Will the individual be held accountable solely, or is it the company? Or who, he's following instructions. What is his recourse?
Well, really good question, Claude. The act takes into account first the individual and then legal personality. So legal personality could be a company. And there are provisions here for companies, corporations, offenses committed by corporations. So it depends on the circumstance. And of course, the investigating officer and the prosecutor would take into account the circumstances and determine whether or not you prosecute that one individual, you prosecute a number of people, or you prosecute the corporation. It depends. We deal with every case on its own circumstances and on its own facts.
There are just two other questions before I leave here. The one is regarding the cyberbullying. Where does the, I call it, these things they put out, the thing just slipped me now. These cartoon-like things that they do, where does that fit in? Emoji, in that time, what's the name? Memes. Where do memes fit into this?
Regarding, you say cyberbullying?
Well, I'm trying to figure where, but to me, it seems like if somebody does memes, they might be under the cyberbullying, and I think that might be a bit harsh. You know, I'm a person who like to look at cartoons and so on, and memes sometimes twist a little thing, but I want to know, how do memes fit into this whole situation?
Are you referring to a sort of a graphic which depicts a particular person?
Yeah, or a cartoon thing of that person saying something based around something they've done?
Based on the definition, if that person uses that meme, and it's something that depicts the actual person, Mr. Sullivan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if the person is a like image of Samuel Joseph, and they would have posted a graphic or picture or poster with his image, and it caused intimidation, fear, and all of these other words, detriment, ruin his reputation, and all of those things, then he would be committing an offense.
A lot of these don't actually deal with the reputation, but some people don't like to be laughed at, and they may feel that it's cyberbullying.
Well,
right?
that could be considered as ridicule.
Yeah,
being laughed at. Even, I take it a little bit further than Lonnie. Even if the image is not that of the person, but it is meant to be depicted as him or her, you have committed the offense.
So therefore that puts us in a great bind. I think that's something that needs to be reconsidered. The whole way of life that you're jeopardizing there. Even in our natural Caribbean way of life, there's some things that nowadays I find, to me personally, the extent of the thing that is called bullying is going far beyond what was considered bullying before. And we need to look at that more. I urge you to look at that a little bit more carefully. The final thing, before I leave here, at least for this section, is I find it strange that a child in your definition is 18 years or older. Yet, for the pictures and so on, the child pornography, a child 16 could give consent for that. That is something I have difficulty rationalizing.
Right. It's two different legislation, but we are at consultation stage. This is not the final draft. So you may well find that when everything is completed, the two might be at 18 or the two might be at 16, whichever is more suited.
There's a question online that came in to ask that when we talked about taking pictures and who own the pictures, what about taking images of adults without their permission if they're in a public space? There's another bill that's currently being worked on, a data protection bill, and that more explicitly deals with who owns your pictures, who owns your data, what do you have to give permission with, and things like that. It's not in this one, but there's another bill that we're going to bring after this one that deals with data protection. Who owns your pictures when you take it? If you're in a public space, can somebody just post it like that? if your children are in a public space or doing something, can somebody who's not related to them take that picture and use it? Can a corporation use it in postcards? Can it be posted on social media? So there's a separate bill that's going to come that deal with data protection.
Yes. And Mr. Morris, you can go ahead.
Another question. Critical infrastructure. I assume while we are laying out these rules and guidelines and legislation, we're also educating the public. Shouldn't that there be a more detailed description of what critical infrastructure is all about?
Yes. Well,
Let me just throw out a few, and certainly by no means it's exhaustive. If you think of your traffic lighting system, for example, where there's a whole set of traffic lights, and somebody hacked into it and closed down all of them, that's critical infrastructure. Your water system, your port authority, your airport network, those things are considered to be critical infrastructure. Remember I mentioned the electricity. If somebody, your communication system, if somebody closed down Lime and for some reason closed down Lime and DigiSouth, those are critical infrastructures.
Yeah, there's a word that we use for that, SCADA, basically, that includes. But what I'm trying to ask, that word or phrase be broken down because it's left hanging.
it is actually broken down, and for your purpose, I could break it down for you. It would mean security, defense, or international relations of Montserrat, or provisions of services directly related to the national or economic security, banking and financial services, public utilities,
Great.
the energy sector, communication sector, like Honorable Joseph would have mentioned earlier about the fiber, public transportation, public health and safety, or public key infrastructure. So it is actually broken down.
Broken down, right.
So if there's anything we're missing in that particular section, please feel free to send in those comments or those inputs.
Okay, thank you.
There's actually another question coming in. I would have. Where does the data protection aspect fit into the amendments, or would that be factored into another piece of legislation? And Honorable Joseph would have mentioned that earlier, that we are in fact doing another bill relating to data protection. So that is our next piece of legislation that we will be bringing to the House. Any other questions from the floor? I think.
My boss wants to ask. He put that burden on me to do that. Now, we know that our first line of access to the internet is the ISP. This discussion has been going on for quite some time, and it's still going on. What law is there or that can be implemented?
Okay.
At a certain point, as we're getting into this cyber hacking, etc.,
Okay.
to hold
To hold them
ISPs
accountable. Okay, so that's actually addressed within the same bill, but we did not go down that road for this particular session, but it is addressed within the other sections within this bill. Okay. So you can go through it and make your comments as well, if there's something particular you want to input. Yeah, but it's there. Some of the offenses would include the hosting provider, cashiering providers, hyperlink providers, search engine providers, and so on. So it does speak to the ISPs, but for the benefit of the public, that might be going in too much technical detail. So we thought we'll just address the critical ones that we think the public can understand and grasp.
And for example, under the hosting provider, that's somebody who hosts website. Because if I have a business and I'm hosting website and you or somebody decide to go and put up some image or comment some activity on it, it's very difficult to see how that person is fully liable. So the way how it's written is that after it is brought to your attention that these things are being hosted on your servers and you do not take steps to immediately remove them or to modify it, then you would have committed an offense. So if it is brought to your attention, these things are happening through your website, these things are happening through your ISP and other things, and you do not take steps to fix the situation, you would have committed an offense.
Okay, any more questions online? I'm just looking to see if there's any more questions on YouTube through the live feed. Okay, one more coming in. What about Facebook Lives, etc.? Is there anything that speaks to the use of Facebook Lives? In terms of what specifically? That's very broad. I'm not sure what that is referring to. So if that person can just rephrase that question a little bit. Question?
Yes, I'm the message carrier.
Sorry, Mr. Sullivan, you want to respond
Yes, go
to
ahead.
that?
Yeah,
before?
I was going to say, it can be captured in your hosting provider, dependent on the circumstances, or it can also be captured in cyberbullying. So if there's continuous reference to a particular person or particular group of persons, it can be captured in your cyberbullying.
Okay, so if that's what the person is
provision.
referring to, then yeah, that would have answered. Yes. Okay, go ahead.
What if a juvenile commits one of those offenses?
That's a good question. What does the penal code refer to?
The offenses really does not cover age group except where there is a person under the age of 10, because somebody under the age of 10 cannot commit an offense.
Okay.
That is what you call a irrebuttable presumption in law. Once you have attained the age of 10, all the offenses covers everybody,
Okay.
juvenile or otherwise. Whether or not that person is prosecuted then is a matter for the prosecution system, the public prosecutions. And we take into account varying different things, whether there's evidence, first of all, and secondly, and probably the most important thing when it comes to the age is whether or not it's in the public interest to prosecute that particular
And
person.
it's been used as a weapon. You know, yeah, correct. GDP, where does the GDP fit into?
That would go under the data protection legislation. Yes. The data protection. Okay, I think no more questions. Anything else you'd like to say, Minister?
But just to say that this is the draft and we're asking the public's input, so we're asking if you haven't watched this from the beginning to go back, look at it from the beginning. The bill is available online and at the public library to have a look, so that when we finally bring it to Parliament, that it represents the views of the community. Because the reason for bringing this legislation is for protection of members of the community. So we need to ensure that the views expressing it actually expresses what the community would like to see. So please have a look, tell your friends about it, go through it, because we have a habit of not saying anything and then at the time when it's done, so that you weren't contacted.
Okay, I have one more question here coming in. How does jurisdiction work? Although these will be our laws here in Montserrat, are there any instances where we can act on these laws even though the offender is abroad?
Now, a lot of people think because they're abroad, they're protected by the deep blue seas. If you commit an offense while abroad that affects somebody in Montserrat, and these are prime examples. Let's use bullying, for example. That somebody abroad is in the habit or has committed the offense of cyberbullying. Depending on the circumstances, you will be, not can be, you will be prosecuted on Ireland. Now, there are different considerations, including the cost of getting a person into Montserrat and extradition and those things. But in the proper circumstance, we will be prosecuting people who commit these offenses.
Okay. The person went on to give an example, and she stated, suppose someone from another country steals the identity of someone in Montserrat. Is there any way we can charge them?
We can always charge them. The difficulty is bringing those persons onto the island. First thing is identification. Second thing is to ensure that there's extradition treaty between that country and the United Kingdom, which covers us, and then embark on steps to get them into the island. But you're really not covered by not being an island. Okay. That is no protection.
Okay.
So long as the circumstances merit that person to be prosecuted, they will be prosecuted.
Okay. Okay, there's no more questions in the audience or online. I think we can close off. Oh, yes, just to remind anyone who's listening online, the deadline for submission of comments, suggestions, your inputs is the 6th of November. So please feel free to email us at mcw@gov.ms, mcw@gov.ms, and the deadline for submission is the 6th of November. Okay, go ahead.
In the interest of educating the public, remote monitoring of devices. I know it's there, but I would like you to, because it's happening too rapidly.
Give an example.
I take over your phone without your knowledge. And be there. Because see, this is the part that we were talking about, including Internet of Things into that group, basically. So it's been happening, and it's been happening rampantly now, where script kiddies, you know who those are, those little hackers that is trying things, go on YouTube and, you know, try to get your IP address and so on and so forth. Could you please really...
Okay, so let me break down what I think you're trying to say.
Right.
You're trying to say if, for instance, you allow somebody to remotely access your computer and...
Back up a bit, not allow.
They did not allow you to,
No,
you're saying?
right.
So,
Yes.
so it's a hacker. So you're illegally accessing a device.
An Internet of Things.
So yes,
So
we
there's
noted your
where,
point
right,
about
there's where.
Internet of
Right.
Things, but that would be a hacker.
So
I thought you meant in terms of somebody getting access to your computer remotely with your permission,
No,
with your
that's-
permission, and then take information off that. No, that's different.
No, that's different. Yeah,
Right,
That's
yes.
different. But just to the DPP, just to really echo how serious that is, and what can happen, the penalties that can, just seriously, because it's rampant.
Most of the provisions, most of the offenses attract a fine. I think the minimum fine I see is 100,000.
No, I think it's 25,000.
25,000.
Yes, the minimum.
And it goes all the way up to $1 million. So that is how serious it is. Let us contrast that with the regular crime in the penal code. Except for dangerous drugs, there are not many offenses which attract those fines. So from that, you can get the context of how serious these infringements are considered to be, these offenses are considered to be. So look at it in the context that these attract really stiff penalties, high fines, and long prison sentences.
Yes, and just to note, these fines and the prison sentence is not just Montserrat, it's comparable to the region. So it's not that we want to impose these hefty fines because we want to. I mean, it's something that is similar to the rest of the region. Just to know that.
There's another question that come in, and I guess this is for the DPP. Can the laws be retroactive?
The straight answer is no. Laws are not retroactive. They take application from the time the act comes into force. So even after it is assented to in Parliament, there will be an assigned date as to when it takes effect, when it comes into force. That is what they call in law coming into force. So, for example, if it is assented to today, you might find something saying that, and it comes into force the first day of 3 months after, or something, or the first day of January 2021, or something like that.
Okay. Another question. Suppose someone shares an indecent image of a child in Montserrat. The age of consent differs from country to country. The country of the offender may be of a lower consent. So suppose someone shares an indecent image of a child in Montserrat. The age of consent differs from country to country. The country of the offender may have a lower age of consent.
Yes.
How is that dealt with?
Right. You're looking at an offense committed under the Montserrat legislation.
Okay.
So you're dealing with the age of
With
consent in Montserrat.
Okay,
Yes.
so that answers that. Okay, go ahead.
Statute of limitations. That's a question. Commit a crime under the legislation that you're doing now. Is there a statute of limitation for those crimes?
There is something called a statute of limitations, and it varies depending on the offenses. These offenses seem to me to be triable on indictment. I have not seen anything which says, just give me indulgence. Give me a minute.
Yeah.
It doesn't say summary conviction. Right, some say summary conviction, others say, well, the others are silent, which means that they are on indictment. If it's an offense, if it's a summary offense, the limitation is 6 months, except where provided for by statute. So the statute might say 1 year, so it extends the limitation from 6 months. But generally speaking, summary offenses are 6 months limitation. The limitation period is 6 months. Offenses that there's nothing prescribed, so it does not say summary conviction. There's unlimited limitation. So as long as possible, you can prosecute under that legislation. So 20 years from now, if you find out an offense was committed and there's no limitation period, you can prosecute.
I think that is it. I'm not seeing any more questions online. Any more questions on the floor? Nope. So I think we have exhausted our time here. Is there any final comments from the panelists? Final comments?
Just asking people to look at the bill, send your comments. Lonnie will give the details after, but I'm just, asking people, go out, look at it, have a read through, make sure it says what you want to say, send the comments to us so that we can make the necessary modifications.
DPP?
Yeah, my final comment would be that this is a time that we should start acting responsibly in terms of the use of the internet and in terms of the use of our devices, and more importantly, what we post on social media. There will be consequences for indiscriminate use and reckless use of social media and the internet. Don't be caught, be responsible, and these provisions should not affect you.
Well said, DPP. And with that said, I would like to reiterate, please send in your comments, mcw@gov.ms. You can contact myself personally if you wish, or the minister, and we will be sure to address your concerns and questions. Please be reminded the deadline for submission of these comments and suggestions will be the 6th of November. So with that said, thank you all for coming out. Thank you to the listening audience online as well. Thank you and have a good night.